Congratulations to Boeing for the miserable success of their Starliner mission. It was an absolute bullseye, better than I think anybody anticipated, Jim Bridenstine said. That's good for the agency, it's good for Boeing, that's good for the United States of America. That's right. The failed attempt of the Starliner to dock with the ISS was a success. As a matter of fact, Jim Bridenstine said that it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. However, when it came to the fact that SpaceX had conducted 10 successful tests of their parachute system that NASA doesn't seem to be satisfied with, and that they had already completed a successful docking with the space station, well, this is what Jim Bridenstine had to say. As a matter of fact, astronaut Nicole Mann said that she could hardly wait to try it out, indicating, and yes, this has been confirmed, that it is entirely possible that NASA is going to attempt a crewed test to the International Space Station using the Starliner, even though it did not successfully complete an uncrewed docking with the station. Damn you, Jim Bridenstine! Good evening, and welcome to episode 4 of The Angry Astronaut. As you may notice, sitting here is my latest project. One of my Christmas gifts. Oh, I love Legos, especially when it comes to Legos that have anything to do with space exploration. Hard at work on this one. I've completed this cool little ship. Oh, wait a minute, they don't make any noise in space. Less dramatic that way, isn't it? What I find very cool, though, is that the pilot of this ship, you can see it there, a female astronaut. Lego is getting with the times. By the way, speaking of female astronauts, Nicole Mann claims that she could have taken charge of the Starliner and piloted it out of that particular anomaly that they were in, and they could have docked with the space station had she been on board, which is entirely possible. She's an F-18 pilot, an experienced astronaut. She might have been able to pull it off, and props to Boeing, by the way, for including a female astronaut in their very first crew of the Starliner. By the way, Elon, given the fact that your company is already under a little bit of fire for being sexist in your hiring practices, you really should have included a female astronaut in your first crew too. Just saying. I don't think you are sexist. Gwynne Shotwell, I think, is an excellent example of why you're not. But still, would have been good for PR. But, nevertheless, this episode wasn't supposed to be about the Starliner and the Crew Dragon and how pissed off I am about all that. I'd love to go off ad nauseum about that particular subject, but I'm not going to. No, I'm going to talk about another subject. A subject that both threatens, that both endanger any mission to Mars and anyone who decides to colonize there, but also makes establishing a colony on Mars absolutely vital. I'm talking about solar radiation, cosmic rays, particularly brought about by extremely powerful solar flares. But instead of rattling on forever about that subject, let's hear from another source. Wow, 60% of the recommended lifetime dose of radiation in a round trip, not even including the amount of time you stay on the planet itself. Sounds impossible, implausible. It's little wonder then that the idea of colonizing Mars has earned yet another big-name detractor. Yep, Neil deGrasse Tyson. In a speech, Tyson called for a rational assessment, quote-unquote, of our ability to settle space and criticized those who make predictions based on, quote, deeply delusional premises, unquote. Oh no, I'm gonna start glowing in the dark, look out, ah! Okay. To all the high-profile science celebrities the world over, I got 2 words for you. Stop it. There's every indication that the effects of solar radiation are being overstated. The stainless steel construction of the Starship, for example, would shield out the vast majority of background radiation. Now, that, of course, doesn't take into account cosmic rays, of course. But there's one thing that is an excellent defense against cosmic rays, and that's water. And the Starship, according to Elon Musk, is designed to carry 100 passengers. And what do those 100 passengers need more desperately than anything else? That's right, water. So, all you have to do is engineer the ship to where water is circulating in the outer hull of the vessel, and you've got yourself an excellent radiation shield. Not only that, NASA is already coming up with a plan to build a radiation bunker, so to speak, where the crew pile up as many high-density objects as they can, as much of the cargo as they can, cluster within those objects, and wait it out. Now, this isn't to suggest that a journey to Mars is going to be free of danger from cosmic rays. Not at all. As a matter of fact, it's going to be quite possibly just as dangerous as it was for colonists that crossed the Atlantic to settle the New World. And that's the way that we need to look at this. Not as a risk-free journey, but a journey that might very well result in the loss of human life. Now, is it worth it? What do you say, little astronaut? Oh, and incidentally, once you get to Mars, are you going to be bombarded with cosmic rays day in and day out until you eventually develop cancer and die? Well, NASA has come up with some pretty interesting ideas on how to deal with that problem too. Have a look. Well, there was actually a surprise winner. AI Space Factory's Marcia, based out of New York. And Penn State came in second place. Want to have a look at it? By all means. Spacious and coated with 3D printed Martian regolith to almost completely screen out Mars's radiation. Now, does this mean that you would be a virtual prisoner inside your little, tall, thin domicile for the rest of your life, not daring to step outside for fear of glowing in the dark? I think I used that joke once already, didn't I? Anyway, no, by no means. As a matter of fact, you could leave your habitat for 3 hours, 3 days a week, so a total of 9 hours a week, or you could add it up if you want to, and not hit the maximum safe radiation dose for a human being for 60 years. That's right, 60 years. So, not nearly as serious as we're thinking. As a matter of fact, you could spend some time out on the surface exploring. Or perhaps building something that isn't 3D printed. Like I'm about to do here. Oh, and by the way, the astronauts that have been on the International Space Station for a sustained period of time, they've been studied in depth, and thus far, they've shown no greater incidence of cancer than people who live on Earth. It makes no sense. They're exposed to far greater radiation. How could that be? Well, my guess is people who come back from space are checked at least annually for cancer, as anybody who lived on Mars would be. And if you catch it early enough, as we all know, a good dose of radiation, probably not even chemo if you catch it early enough, get the tumor under control, cut it out. Obviously, that sounds a whole lot simpler than it actually is. Nobody would really enjoy it. I've had cancer cut out of my body before, and it's no picnic. But nevertheless, people who live on Mars would be much more closely monitored than people here on this planet. And I suspect that the incidence of cancer amongst Martians would be no greater than the incidence of cancer amongst people who live here, because they'd just be a lot more vigilant against it. Anyway, like I said, it's time to build something that isn't 3D printed. So I'm going to get down to that and be back with you in a second. So while I'm building, let's talk about the ship that's going to bring us there. SpaceX's Starship. Mounted atop the BFR, or Big Falcon rocket, this vessel generates 12 million pounds of thrust, or twice that of the space shuttle. Clearly with rockets, size does matter. And once detached, the Starship would refuel in orbit via another Starship and use its 6 Raptor engines with almost 2 million pounds of thrust to push it all the way to Mars. Some have theorized that this could make the trip in significantly less than 6 months. Good morning, everyone. And yes, those were Legos in that final shot. Please, please, Lego, manufacture some SpaceX products. It would be so incredibly cool. But it's the morning, a new day. I've got my coffee and so anyway, made some progress. Check this out. Little habitation pod. Complete. Ah! No! Damn you, Legos. Complete with an airlock. And some scientists inside. Anybody have an idea of what this is? I'll give you a hint. It's the only NASA project that I'm really enthusiastic about. Anyway, when I was talking to you about radiation and the danger that it represents to our astronauts and to colonization of Mars, I also mentioned that I would talk about something terrifying, something that would be a threat to our civilization here, and something that would make colonization of Mars an absolute essential. And that is a coronal mass ejection, sort of a solar superstorm. A lot of you may be familiar with what these are, but unlike asteroids, they're really not that infrequent. As a matter of fact, the last one that hit our planet was back in 1859. As near as we can tell, we get hit by these things roughly every century or so, which means we're overdue for one. So, what does a coronal mass ejection mean for this planet? What would happen if one hit us? Well, back in 1859, it caused a complete disruption of all electrical systems and even melted the copper in the transformers. Now, fortunately, back in the 19th century, almost nobody relied on electrical power. So, it was no big deal. Today, if something like that were to hit the planet and we were unprepared, it would cause a blackout of cataclysmic levels. And it wouldn't just be a temporary thing. It would blast almost every transformer, at least on the hemisphere that was facing the coronal mass ejection. And we wouldn't be able to restore power until we replaced all of the damaged equipment. And that's a lot of transformers. We're talking months and months without power. Think of what that would represent to civilization. So, let's say we got lucky. Let's say that this coronal mass ejection slams into our planet on the eastern hemisphere. And the western hemisphere is completely unaffected. So then China, perhaps a large portion of Russia, Asia in general, would have their entire electrical grid completely taken down. What would that mean for them? Well, think about how much our technology relies on electrical power. Think of how much our distribution system, our food distribution system especially, relies on electrical power. What would happen to major cities like Shanghai, Tokyo, perhaps Moscow, places like that? It wouldn't be a lot of time before people would start to starve. There would be no effective way of distributing the necessary supplies to these teeming millions without electrical power. And by the time power was restored and things returned to normal, millions would be dead. No easy way to say that. Millions would be dead. And meanwhile, on our side of the planet, what would happen? Well, think about what would happen if the entire economy of China crashed. The entire economy of Japan crashed. Think of what that would do to our economy over here. It would cause a cataclysmic crash that would make 1929 look like a joke. So, given all the chaos that that would represent, do you think we would be in any kind of position to help out countries like Russia, China, Southeast Asia? Probably not, given the fact that we're not even willing to help a few thousand migrants who are desperately trying to cross our borders. Seems very unlikely that we would do anything to help millions upon millions of people in China when our own economy was in a state of disaster. So what if the Western world decides not to play nice? Well, the Eastern world would still have an ace in the hole that would have survived such a catastrophe. That's right, nuclear weapons. They're hardened against electromagnetic radiation. And what if they use them to try to compel us to help? And, even more terrifyingly, what if we think they're bluffing and that they're not actually going to resort to nuclear weapons to get help? Tragically, like the scenario we had with global warming, we would have a chaotic world, a world where the use of thermonuclear weapons is an all too present possibility. As a matter of fact, a probability. That, again, is why we need a manned presence on another planet. It's absolutely essential. There are too many ways that our civilization here is vulnerable. Now, wouldn't an established colony on Mars have the same problem from a coronal mass ejection? Not necessarily. If you build a civilization from the ground up, you can harden it against electromagnetic radiation. You could make a Martian colony essentially immune to the effects of a coronal mass ejection. We've just been short-sighted enough in the construction of our own power grid to not protect it against these sorts of cataclysms. So, that being the case, I'm, once again, not going to sit here and preach gloom and doom to you. Even though we are overdue for a massive solar storm, and even though the effects of that storm could be cataclysmic, there are things we can do to stop it. For example, there is one outdated and aging satellite between us and the sun that will give us warning if a coronal mass ejection is heading our way. If we can get the entire power grid shut down before the solar storm hits, we can escape its effects. Now, we're not talking about a lot of time here. 15, 20 minutes, maybe an hour at the outside. To get the entire world to shut off its power grid without any drills beforehand to practice for such things doesn't seem very likely. That's why we need preparations, just as we need to do something about global warming. And once again, we are being short-sighted and not doing enough. But still, it is possible. There are things that we can do to protect our planet from disaster. But we need to take action now. In the meantime, once again, it would be foolhardy indeed, for us not to establish a second human presence elsewhere in case the worst happens. That's why going to Mars is so critical, no matter how difficult it is. And I'm going to be bringing up more objections to the colonization argument. More experts who present all kinds of reasons as to why this is impractical or impossible. And then at the same time, I'm also going to tell you about a terrifying variety of reasons why we absolutely have to colonize Mars. So until next time, thank you. Oh, and guess what? I'm not blowing up something this time. Nope. I'm going to keep working on this. For once, the angry astronaut is going to build rather than destroy. I'd be interested, by the way, if you could, in the comments, give me a guess on what this is. I'd be interested to get your opinions. So until next time, have a Happy New Year.